How to Be Decisive. Or alternatively, we could call this How to Stop Being Indecisive. Creating the good life requires a long series of clear, high-quality decisions. So indecision is one of your greatest dangers and enemies in this work. The quality of your decisions will determine the quality of your life. Your decisions will make or break you. Many people waste and ruin their lives simply through indecision and stalling out. And the bottom line is that you cannot afford indecisiveness if you are going to be self-actualizing. That's not a luxury you have. Here are some examples of decisions within personal development that you'll commonly run across in this work. For example, should you work on your life purpose first or on your dating? Should you work on your career first or get into spirituality? How long should you delay getting into spirituality? How good should your finances be before you feel comfortable taking meditation retreats? Should you get more education or should you jump straight into working? What are the pros and cons of doing that? How hard should you work? How much time should you allocate between work, family life, and relaxation or enjoying yourself, enjoying life? Should you change careers if you find yourself in a career that doesn't suit you? Should you leave a relationship? Should you take psychedelics now, or should you wait till you're more mature, until you're older, and maybe till you're done with setting up your business or your career? How should you store or invest your savings that you're making from your business and your career? Should you sleep with this person who you know isn't right for you? Which business idea should you start with? Which passion should you follow if you have like two things in life that you're passionate about? Let's say you're passionate about music and you're passionate about filmmaking. Which one? Or should you do both of them at the same time? Which meditation technique should you commit to? Or should you use multiple techniques? Should you get married? Should you have children and when? And to whom, of course? Very critical question. Critical decision. Should you distance yourself from your family if they're not the healthiest people and they're not into personal development or their values don't align with your values? Should you take 3 months off of work to meditate? Where should you live? Where should you settle down? This is just a brief list of the kinds of decisions that you'll have to be making throughout your life to create the good life. Of course, these are sort of like very basic decisions. Your decisions can become much more specifically tailored to whatever life purpose you're following and whatever specific objectives you have in your life, in your spiritual work, in your relationships, in your dating life, in your business, career, and so forth. Here's the trick, though, is that many decisions you make are made by default through inaction and stalling or not deciding. For example, you might find yourself in a job that you don't like, that doesn't align with your values and that you're not passionate about, that you don't find meaningful. And you could make a decision to say, I'm not going to put up with that, and I'm going to do the work to transition into a different career, into a better job, into starting my own business, or whatever that might be. But what most people will do, because making that decision is difficult and scary and uncomfortable, what they'll do is they'll just stall. They'll just wait. It's like, well, I can tolerate this. It's not, my job isn't so bad. I mean, it's not like slave labor. It's all right. My boss is pretty nice and I get decent salary and it's all right. And then you just kind of stall for a year and another year and another year. And before you know it, a whole decade goes by and you're just stalling. And really what you're being here is you're being indecisive. By default, your life is going to go down a certain trajectory like a freight train on rails. This default trajectory is what will happen when you don't make bold, clear decisions. It's when you just kind of settle for the path of least resistance. You don't think creatively outside the box. You don't push yourself. You don't have any ambitions. and you just kind of like go through the motions of life. But this is not going to create a great life. To create a great life, you must take some bold decisions and switch tracks of this freight train. Your life has a lot of momentum behind it. This momentum has been set by the first 20 years of your upbringing, your culture, your family situation, whatever career or job you happen to fell into, however you're surviving, all your survival patterns, those are established in the first 20 years of your life. Those are cemented into your brain and your mind and your psyche. And then, but what gets cemented there is not something great or extraordinary or anything even close to your full potential as a human being. This is just kind of like default basic stuff, right? Like when you're born, society programs you with a very basic operating system that just allows you to survive socially, culturally, economically a little bit usually. And that's about it. That's like all you get. You don't get something amazing. You get something mediocre and just kind of like passable, maybe comfortable if you're lucky. So to create the great life, you're going to have to make a series of bold decisions, a series of track changes to this freight train. These bold decisions will be scary and uncomfortable. You will tend to stall on them, justifying to yourself that what you've already got is good enough. You know, after all, why risk it? But what you have to remind yourself is that the default, not making these bold decisions, will never lead you to your highest potential. Actualizing your highest potential requires pushing your comfort zone. Without bold decisions, you will tend to just get stuck in a rut of complacency and what's called the derp state. Owen Cook from RSD calls it the derp state. I like that particular framing. You're just sleepwalking through life. That's another way to state it. I've talked about that in the past. Sleepwalking through life. Wasting years of your life just kind of going through the motions, treading water, and missing out on massive new growth opportunities and experiences. These bold decisions expose you to new experiences, to new challenges, which force your body and mind to adapt and to grow. Here are some of the biggest decisions I've made in my life, just to give you an idea of what I mean by these bold decisions. Early on in my life, I chose the passionate life, to work hard in my life, to be ambitious. That's a decision I made when I was young. I knew I didn't want a mediocre life, and that was one of the most important decisions I've ever made. What that meant for me in my life is that I worked extra hard. I've had to work more than most people work. But that's compensated by all the fruits that I got from that over time by investing through hard work since my teenage years, doing it for a couple of decades. That snowballed into something that now is a pretty amazing and rare kind of life that most people don't have and couldn't really even dream of getting. Another big decision I made is focusing seriously on my education when I was young. I didn't waste my time socializing and doing stupid shit, going to parties, drinking, and smoking weed and whatever else. I really focused on academics. This built a very good foundation for me that has served me well all the way till today. I'm coasting on that hard work that I did with my academic pursuits. And that was a conscious decision I made, because what happened was that up until about 9th grade, I was kind of going through the motions of school. I wasn't that serious about school. I mean, I got decent grades and so forth, but I wasn't really serious about education. I was just kind of doing what everybody was doing. And that was that. And then in 9th grade, there was a shift where I realized, why am I sitting around in these classes with these fools around me who are not taking their education seriously? And then it kind of dawned on me, I got to get serious about education. And so I upgraded the classes that I enrolled in into a bunch of very challenging AP classes, honors classes, science and math and all this history and all this sorts of stuff. And I really challenged myself academically. And also I started learning philosophy on my own. I started reading books on my own. thinking about deep existential topics on my own, and really educating myself, basically. And that was a very deliberate decision. And if I didn't make that decision back then, man, like my life would be so much worse today than it is. I'm so glad I made that decision. Another decision I made is to focus on my life purpose early on in my life versus socializing. So I deliberately made a decision to not socialize, to not have a bunch of friends, to not have girlfriends, to delay having sex, all these things. I deliberately put all that off because I knew that I wanted to focus on my life purpose for the first 5 to 10 years of my young adult life. And that served me very well because I was able to get my career on track. I was able to get my first business going. I was able to make myself financially independent the way I wanted to. I was able to gain my creative autonomy as a creator. That was so much more important to me than having sex or having fun with friends or having a bunch of friends. Now, that was a trade-off. I sacrificed for that. And in certain ways, I even regret doing that. But also, on the other hand, I don't regret it because of what I gained, right? There's stuff you gain and stuff you lose. So this is the challenge of making these decisions, is that a decision is not always all upside. There's usually trade-offs, and there's usually downsides to choices you make, but you have to find those choices that align with your deepest values, even though there's certain trade-offs. We'll get to that in a moment. Let me give you some more examples, though, of other decisions that I've made. Another bold decision I made is when I entered university, I was planning to become an aerospace engineer. So I went into aerospace engineering as my major. I finished 2 years of the foundations of sort of engineering training, a lot of science, a lot of physics, a lot of math. And then 2 years into it, I decided that this is not, like, I looked into the future. I saw that being an engineer was not appropriate to me. It didn't fit my values. And that I needed to cut my losses. Even though I invested so much time into it already, I needed to cut my losses and transition into a different life purpose and a different career. And so I did that. And that was also a very deliberate decision. I can still remember to this day, the very day where I made up that decision, that I told my family about it. And we discussed it. Then I switched majors and into philosophy. From engineering, I went into philosophy, and then I went into game design. So that was so important, because if I stayed with engineering and if I became an engineer, I would have been so miserable, so miserable. That would have been completely the wrong career for me and the wrong major. So that was a good decision. Another bold decision I made is to, about the same time as I switched to from engineering to philosophy, I was like 21 years old. I made the decision to really get my weight under control. I was overweight for most of my life up until that point. And then I became very serious about working out. I became serious about controlling what I put in my body, what I eat. I didn't immediately shift to a very clean diet. I still ate a bunch of junk food and stuff like that. But it was like I made a significant, very, very dramatic change. Within 5 months, I lost 65 pounds, got to my current weight that I'm basically at right now. And I've kept that off ever since. And that really became my journey towards cleaning up my diet significantly. And then over the next 10 years, I cleaned up my diet so significantly. Again, I don't know where I would be at. I might even be dead at this point if I kept eating the kind of food I was eating back then and treating my diet and my health so recklessly the way that I was back then. So that was a great decision. Also, that had a huge impact on my dating life, a huge impact on my self-esteem and confidence, my self-image. A lot of those issues were resolved through that change. The next big, bold decision I made was I went to game design. I became a professional game designer for a few years. And then as I was doing that, I had another sort of epiphany where I realized that working for anybody, having a boss of any kind, was completely unsuitable to what I wanted out of my life. It contradicted my deepest values, my creative autonomy and ambitions. And so I knew at that point that I had to figure out how to be my own boss. So I made a very bold decision to quit my game design job. I was working at a great studio, one of the best in the world, on a AAA project. And I quit in the middle of that, which was very difficult to do because I spent years developing my skills as a game designer, and landing that position was very challenging. I just broke into the game industry, design industry as a designer, entry-level designer. That's very difficult to do at the studio that I did it at, like almost unheard of. And then I said no to that. And I can still remember to this very day, the very day that I decided to quit in my own mind, and just how significant that changed the whole trajectory of my life. And it put me into a situation where I had to fend for myself. I couldn't rely on a paycheck from anybody. I wasn't getting a salary from anybody. Like, I had to make my own way in the world financially. That began my journey of learning about business, about marketing, about sales. That was a challenge. Like, that really pushed me. That was especially difficult for me because I wasn't like, I despised marketing, sales, and business. I'm truly like, I'm very creative at heart, right? To me, what's most important is the creativity. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the business, all that shit. I don't care about that. Only to the extent that I need it in order to be creative. So in that sense, I had to care about it. But anyways, I had to go and like teach myself all that very quickly to become financially independent, and then to fund my own creative efforts in the future. That was so crucial to where I am today and my ability to start Actualized.org and all that kind of stuff. So starting my first business was a huge, bold decision. The next one is, after I succeeded in that, I did internet marketing for a while, built websites and did web development type stuff. I did that for like 3 or 4 years, became fairly successful at that, started earning 6 figures from that, and became financially well off, learned about business, learned about marketing, all that kind of stuff. And then I realized that this internet marketing stuff, like, it's really the work of the devil. I have to get out of this industry. Even though it earns good money, it's leading me down the wrong path, and it's conflicting with my deepest values. And so I made a very clear decision that I'm going to move out of that. And then I was looking for what that next thing was going to be. And eventually that led me to starting Actualized.org. And that was also one of the best decisions that I've made in my life. Because if I stayed in internet marketing, I would have compromised my own values so much, and I would have become depressed and miserable, and I would have lost my passion, and then I wouldn't have really been able to do the kind of work that I'm doing today. The next big decision I made is moving to Las Vegas. At that point, I was living in Dallas, Texas, and I wanted to work on my dating skills. I couldn't really do that to the degree that I wanted to in Dallas, so I moved to Las Vegas. That was a difficult decision. I remember I had a life coach at that point that I was working with who was helping me, and I remember, like, I was so stressed out over that decision. I didn't know, should I move? What if I move and I'm gonna hate it? What if it's the wrong decision? Blah, blah. So all this kind of stuff. We talked about it for days. And then eventually I just said, you know what? If I don't move, I'm just gonna stay here. And I've already been here for like 5 years living in Dallas. So like, it's just gonna be the same old thing again. It's like, I'm gonna stagnate. Or I can move to this new city, new possibilities, new adventures, new experiences, new friends, new people, living off on my own, away from family, from everybody. And I saw the potential for growth there. And I just said, you know what, even if it's going to be a decision that I regret, I'm still going to do it because it's going to grow me so much. So I chose the growth decision. And that worked out well for me. The next big decision I made is after I launched Actualized.org, and I was having early success over the first few years with doing sort of self-help videos and getting traction with that. Then I had to make a decision of like, do I focus on the marketing and sales aspects of my business, or do I focus on creating deeper content? To create deeper content meant that I have to spend a lot more time researching, developing myself, studying, and really going into like, you know, depth of deepening my own understanding of these psychological and spiritual topics that I talk about. I could go that direction, but then I won't have time to do all the marketing and salesy stuff. Or I could do all the marketing and salesy stuff, and then the videos are going to be kind of shallow and just kind of like, you know, mainstream self-help type stuff, because I won't have enough depth from which to speak and teach. And the videos will also be much shorter, and they're not going to contain as much depth to them. So I made a decision to forget the marketing stuff and salesy stuff and to focus on the depth of the videos. And I did that for like 3 or 4 years. And basically, I'm still sticking with that decision to this day. Now, in a certain sense, like, that was a difficult decision because I literally gave up millions of dollars. I could be making millions of dollars more. I could be millions richer right now if I went with the marketing and sales decision. But to me, what that doesn't align with my values. My values require me to go for depth and profundity of understanding. That's one of my top values, is understanding and depth. So I'm very glad I made that decision. I didn't kind of sell out or just make shallow content, and really focused like on my craft and my depth of understanding myself and reality and consciousness and all that, spirituality. So even though I lost a lot of views and I lost a lot of potential subscribers and a lot of, money and, success and fame, all that was lost. I mean, also I had to make the decision to give up a lot of sex. Because see, like at that point I was living in Las Vegas. I could be going out. I could have been going out like every day, every night, every weekend to clubs, hooking up with girls. I could have been doing that. I could have had sex with hundreds of girls over like 5 or 6 years that I was, really going into depth on deepening my content. I could have been doing that in addition to doing all the salesy, markety stuff. I gave all that up for the depth of the videos, right? That was also a conscious decision. Which sometimes I regret, honestly. But on the other hand, I would never give up the depth of what I know now and the levels of consciousness that I've accessed for any amount of sex. But that was a difficult decision as well. The next big decision I made is buying my house. I'm very frugal and conservative with my money, and so that was the biggest item that I've ever purchased in my life. And that turned out to be a great decision too. And then one other decision that I made, bold decision, is I decided I don't remember exactly where this happened in my life, but I decided somewhere in my life, probably pretty early, that I want to be a prolific creator. I want to just be creative all the time, put out a ton. I want my body of work to be massive. I made a clear decision about that. That's what I wanted. And that I wanted to be a massive value provider. I want to just shower people with value. That was also a very deliberate decision that I've stuck to. So these are just some examples of bold, big, challenging decisions that I've made. This is not to brag or anything. This is just to show you how it actually works. So I'm not saying you have to make these decisions yourself. I'm just giving you an example. And then the question is going to be what are going to be these big, bold decisions for you? They might end up looking very different than my decisions. But this gives you an idea. And really, my whole life where I am today has been defined and shaped by these, this was about 10 to 12 major decisions that I made in my life. Now, of course, I've made a lot of minor decisions, but these 10 or 12 really high quality decisions have made my whole life. It's actually quite amazing when I think about it like that. I haven't thought about it like that until I started thinking about talking about this topic here with you. So I want you to start to think these major, bold decisions, you don't need hundreds of them to transform your life. A good dozen, if they're the right decisions at the right time, aligning with your values, and they're big, significant decisions that expose you to a lot of experience and really push you beyond your comfort zone, this will make or break your life. There's other decisions that I'm still, contemplating for the future. I've thought about quitting Actualized.org and going to meditate for just 6 months straight. Not even talk to a single human for 6 months. Just go balls to the wall with my spirituality. I haven't made that decision yet, but that would be a bold one I could make in the future. Another decision I've been thinking about is renting an RV or buying an RV actually. Rather than renting it, buying an RV and then traveling around the country. Literally every city in the US, visit all of it, see all of it, interact with people, meet people. That would be a very different lifestyle than the one I've been leading for the last 10 years. Another bold decision might be moving to a different country and experiencing what it's like to live in a third world country, for example. That would be a huge growth opportunity, potentially. Another one is starting or joining a spiritual community. Maybe for you, that might mean joining one. For me, that might mean starting one. I don't know. I'm still toying with that. That's a very dangerous idea. Starting or joining a spiritual community, those can be notoriously bad. So I've held off on that. But lately I've been thinking about how do I take my work and my stuff to the next level? How do I challenge myself? And the way that I would challenge myself is, of course, I still got inner spiritual work to do on myself. But really the challenge for me would come next. A lot of growth would come for me if I was pushed to lead an actual spiritual community in a conscious way. That would really, test all the theory and all the stuff that I've been learning kind of independently and kind of just embodying on my own, trying to embody it in a community setting. That's a whole next level. So these are just some ideas. Bold decisions will thrust you into new situations and expose you to massive experience, and they will force you to become stronger. Basically, you're not going to grow very much in your life unless something is pushing you to grow. Something has to be forcing you. Now, that could be some external pressure, like, someone in your family dies and now you have to work extra hard to pay the bills. It could be something like that. But really, that's not ideal. What's ideal is for your own ambition to push you, for your own ambition to have you make bold decisions that put you into challenging situations that then force you to become tougher and to grow. And if you don't do that, if all you're doing is just sitting at home and reading books and watching spiritual videos, that's not going to be enough to actualize your full potential. You need some kind of medium that's going to push you forward, that you're working in. You need some kind of challenge, some sort of like larger objective. Remember, we talked about the hero's journey. I have an episode called The Highest Hero's Journey. We also talked about the hero's journey a lot in my life purpose course, if you've checked that out. So if you remember with the hero's journey begins with a bold decision. The hero has to accept the call to adventure. He has to accept the journey. And usually the hero, in a good, proper hero's journey story, refuses the call multiple times until he's forced into it, forced into accepting the call. So I want you to think about, where in your life have you been stalling and refusing the call of your hero's journey? Because it seems as though the hero's journey sounds so exciting and adventurous. Why would the hero refuse the call? But see, that's kind of a cartoon version of the hero's journey. The reality of the hero's journey is that to accept the call, this is usually you're accepting something uncomfortable, scary, difficult. And your mind doesn't want to accept that because your mind is lazy and it's comfortable where it is. So what I'd like you to do is to contemplate the following question. What is the default trajectory of your life right now? If you don't make any more bold decisions going forward, if all you do is you just keep doing and following the trajectory or track that you're on, what is that? Where's that track going to lead you? Contemplate that. And ask yourself, is that going to be the actualization of your highest potential? Is that going to be something that you're truly satisfied with? And then contemplate the next question. What are some bold decisions you could make to shift this default trajectory into something higher? I want you to become very mindful of how you stall out your life by being indecisive. Now, when you're making decisions, what's really going on is that each decision you make is based on honoring certain values. Every decision is saying yes to one value and no to some other value. Now, the problem is that most people are making decisions unconsciously. You need to start making conscious decisions, and you got to become very conscious of what values your decisions are honoring. Because usually when you make a decision, it's not explicit in your mind that, oh, this decision here, my decision to go to a party is honoring the value of blank, whatever that is. Usually it's like, or like my decision to order a pizza and sit on the couch and veg out for 10 hours watching Netflix reruns of some show and eating a whole pizza, that's honoring a certain value and that's dishonoring some other value. And then the quality of your life is really just a direct reflection of the decisions you make and whether they're honoring your top, let's say, 10 values. And as long as you're making decisions that are dishonoring your top 10 values, then you're going to have a miserable life and you're going to hate yourself and you're going to hate your life. And eventually it's going to lead you to depression and even suicidal thoughts. So the idea here is very simple. Make decisions that align with the principles of self-actualization, what we call the good life, truth, love, consciousness, and selflessness. This, and also with health. This would be the recipe for creating the good life. Now, why is making decisions so important? Is because you need to focus your energy as much as possible at one point. This is a core principle of strategic thinking. It's called the concentration of force or focus. Remember, I have an old episode called How to Be a Strategic Motherfucker. Very aptly named. It's all about strategic thinking. There I outline the principles of strategic thinking. It's a very important episode. Go watch that. And one of the first principles of strategic thinking is the concentration of force. It's also about how you're allocating your finite resources. See, creating greatness requires focus. And you have finite resources at your disposal. Your resources are basically time, energy, money, and your health. These are your resources. How are you going to allocate them? What are you going to transmute those resources into, if anything at all? How are you going to invest them? What are you going to get for them? For your time, your money, your energy, your health? What are you going to get in return over the next 10 or 20 years? Now, I've talked about this topic of investing in the past, and I have a few more episodes I want to shoot about that because it's such an important topic because people are generally such poor investors in their own lives. So making good decisions is really about making good investments. And what are the best investments you can make in your life? It's honoring your top values, which of course means you have to know what your top values are, which is something that I go into a lot of depth on in the Life Purpose course. So check that out if you're unclear about what these values are and how to find them. The course takes you through a step-by-step process for how to find your top values. So I have a previous episode called Why Valuable Things Require Development Over Time. That's an episode about investing. Go watch that and connect it with this episode because really your decisions are decisions to invest your finite resources into the things that should matter most to you in your life, the things you find most meaningful, the things that are most aligned with the things you love in your life. And since you have finite time, you have to understand that there's a concept called here opportunity cost. Whatever you're doing in your life, if you're going to a party, if you're getting a girlfriend, if you're getting married, if you're starting this business rather than that business, if you're doing meditation versus yoga versus psychedelics versus something else, all those things present opportunity costs. Because when you're doing one of those things, you're not doing something else that you could be doing. When you're meditating for an hour every day, that's 1 hour a day you're losing. Are you investing it well? Are you meditating well? Or are you going to spend the next 10 years meditating in a half-assed manner, half asleep, not really gaining any spiritual benefit from that, but you're going to invest, 365 hours a year times 10 years, that's 3,500 hours will get invested in this meditation practice. What else could you have done with 3,500 hours? Well, that's a lot. It's a lot of hours. See? Likewise with everything else you're doing in your life. So you have to do sort of an audit or an inventory of your life, how you're investing your time, and are you making good decisions and good investments? And is there something better you could be doing with that time? How else could you be investing it? Notice that high-paying jobs require being good at making important decisions quickly. Sometimes people say, like, under the capitalist system, these CEOs and corporate bigwigs, they make so much more money than their, low-level employees. And in a certain sense, it's obscene how much the differential in salary and income is between, the top executives versus the grunt level workers. It is obscene, it is gross, and it is unfair and unconscious. But what is being missed there by a lot of socialist type and progressive type of people is that actually, one of the most valuable things in life is not hard manual labor. It's actually the quality of the decisions you're making. So some of these CEOs and corporate bigwigs, actually, they're able to generate genuine value, a lot of genuine value, by being really good strategic thinkers, big picture thinkers, visionaries, and being able to make very important decisions quickly. On these decisions can hinge thousands of lives, billions of dollars, and many other important things. And the reality is that most people would not be able to fit in these jobs and to execute these jobs because they're just so bad at making decisions. They would screw it up, and they would run these companies into the ground. So it's not simply that the CEO or something is in this privileged capitalist position. It is also that he or she has developed the skills necessary to make important decisions. Now, sometimes they make bad decisions, and nobody is going to be making important decisions perfectly all the time. Of course, many of these CEOs make bad decisions, but overall, if you give the average person this position, they're going to screw it up royally. So being able to make high-quality decisions requires quite a lot of development. Ignorant people, fools, cannot make high-quality decisions. Making good decisions requires wisdom, vision, experience, discipline, integrity, holism, big picture thinking, education, a sense of history, a lack of bias, a clear, undistorted perception of reality. The more twisted your mind is, the more ungrounded your mind is, the more you're lost in fantasy and ideology, the more closed-minded you are, the worse you're going to be at seeing reality accurately, and then you won't be able to make high-quality decisions. So here's an exercise I'd like you to do at home. Ask yourself this question: what are the best decisions you've made in your life? Make a list. Then make a second list. What are the worst decisions you've made in your life? And after you get both these lists, I want you to compare them and ask yourself, what made the best decisions so good and what made the worst decisions so bad? That's a homework assignment for you. Okay, moving on. So I've also talked about the concept of integrity. See my episode, What is Integrity? Integrity requires being decisive. Why is that? Well, because integrity is pretty rare. Most people do not have very high integrity. And so if you have some kind of vision for a great life, for having a great impact on the world, for your life purpose, for being creative, artistic, whatever, and then you go about trying to execute on that vision, you're going to need integrity to execute on that vision. And everybody around you, your friends, your family, your coworkers, and just random people who are observing you, they're all going to start criticizing you, nitpicking what you're doing, creating doubt in your mind, and infecting you with their own lack of integrity. You are going to have to stand up for your top values in the face of an unconscious world and an unconscious society. Remember, we are living right now in the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages did not end 1,000 years ago. We're still in the Dark Ages. And if you want to bring some light into the world, you're going to have to contend with the darkness that's going to try to snuff out the light. Most people live like animals along a path of least resistance. Most people are not decisive. They're not clear. They're not living according to their values. They are not ambitious. They are not seeking to bring light into the world. They are not making decisions for themselves. They are letting society and culture decide for them by programming their mind with memes and ideology. And most people have very little integrity because all they're doing is they're just struggling to survive. They're just doing the thing that will allow them to survive to the next day and throughout the next week. They're not thinking very far. They're not interested in developing themselves. They're not interested in health and holism, not individually, but also not collectively. They're not properly educated. They're not very conscious. They're not doing spiritual practices. They're not eating healthy. None of these things. They're just chasing their base instincts, cravings, and desires and avoiding their deepest fears. That's what's controlling most people. They're like puppets on strings. And even the ones that think that they're above it, they're still puppets on strings. The ones that think that they're contrarians and that are challenging mainstream society, those people are especially puppets on strings. They're doing all that unconsciously with very little integrity. So if you want to be a high integrity person, a high consciousness person, you're going to have to hold yourself to a much higher standard. Because society, other people, they will not hold you to a high enough standard because their own standards are so low. You're going to have to set the standard for yourself and for everybody else around you. This is what it means to be a conscious leader. And to set this standard and to live by this standard, to meet this high standard of your own, you're going to have to make some bold decisions, and you have to stick with them in the face of all the darkness that surrounds you, all the ignorance and unconsciousness that surrounds you, all the groupthink and the mass paranoia and hysteria, the culture wars and all the distractions, all the petty human bullshit that's around you. This is all going to be trying to distract you and tempt you to break your integrity. And you're going to have to make a decision. You know, one of the most important decisions you can make in your life is whether you want to be a high integrity person or not. Being decisive gives you a sense of direction and clarity of mind and peace of mind. It's very relieving to know what you're doing in your life, what your ultimate mission is, the big picture, because then that informs what you're doing on a micro level. Once you got the macro level figured out, you can easily figure out what you got to do at the micro level every single day. And when this is all aligned with your top values, it's very fulfilling, it's very rewarding, and it gives you a certain groundedness and stability in the face of chaos and distraction and hysteria that's all around you. You know, you got a purpose, you got a mission, you're on it, your mind is clear, you know what your values are, you know what the right decisions are, you know you're going to be a high integrity person. This gives you enormous peace of mind to know that you don't need to compromise on these things and that you know where you're going. That's one of the benefits of being decisive. When you're indecisive, you're wishy-washy, you're like a leaf blowing in the wind. You know, anybody can pull you in one direction or the next. Every little, bump in the road, every little hysteria in the news cycle, it's got you all riled up and you're running around, you're ungrounded. You're very easily influenced and misled. You cannot create a good life without being clear about what you want. First of all, you have to be clear that you want to create the good life. Most people don't know what they want. They're very unclear. And in fact, clarity itself should be a core value of yours. I'm going to have a whole episode in the future just about the value of clarity, because it's one of those values that usually people don't think about when they're thinking about their values. But clarity is a very powerful potential value, because clarity is what allows you to be decisive. You can't be decisive unless you know what you really want out of life. Once you figure that out, being decisive is rather easy. So I recommend that you make a sort of principled decision to never be squishy, unclear, mumbly, and wishy-washy. Not in your language or your communication, not in the decisions that you're making in your life, not in the projects that you're undertaking, not in the people you're choosing to allow into your life or not. Like, be clear about all those things. Set that as a goal for yourself, is that kind of inner clarity. And then once you have that clarity, that's what's required to also become a conscious leader. Because most people are unclear, so what they need somebody to follow who is clear. And I'll have an episode about conscious leadership in the future coming soon as well. Have you ever even sat down in your life and made a decision about who you want to be? Like, what kind of character do you want to be? When people look at you or they talk about you behind your back, what do you want them to say about you? What do you want them to perceive your highest values to be? And then what kind of actions would you have to take? How would you have to carry yourself so that people felt your values without you even having to explicitly tell them what your values are? They just know what your values are because of the way that you carry yourself and the way that you embody them in your life. So think about that. Sit down and spend a couple hours just thinking about, what kind of character do I want to be? How do I want others to perceive me? Do I want others to perceive me as somebody whose top value is money or sex or laziness or depression or judgment and hatred or dogmatism and closed-mindedness or lack of health? Think about that. Decide what you want in your life and decide what you definitely don't want in your life. For example, decide that you don't want hard drugs in your life. Decide that you don't want to be a cheater. Decide that you don't want to be a thief. Decide that you don't want to be taking shortcuts. Decide that you don't want to be eating junk food. Decide that you don't want to be chasing get-rich-quick schemes. Decide that you don't want to be a leech on society and a value leech upon the world. Decide that you don't want to be a net drag on the environment, for example. These are all decisions you could make. Now, I'm not telling you what to decide. You can decide whatever you want. These are just examples of things you could decide that you definitely don't want. And then you can cut those out of your life permanently. Also, what's nice about being decisive is that when you're indecisive, this actually wastes a lot of mental energy, because you're kind of like in this gray area where you're not sure. Like, maybe you're in a relationship, but you haven't decided clearly that you don't want to be a cheater. Therefore, you're tempted to cheat. And maybe sometimes you do cheat, sometimes you don't cheat. And so there's this whole like tug of war in your mind of like, should I cheat? Shouldn't I cheat? Should I cover up my cheating? What should I say? How should I lie about it? And then like you're doing all this. And even if you're not cheating, let's say you hold off and you don't cheat, but just the fact that you're thinking through all this stuff and that you're even allowing the possibility of cheating to be part of your reality, this is already wasting a lot of your mental energy that you could and should be using towards much higher things. Similar, like with eating junk food, for example. When you haven't made a clear decision to cut out all junk food in your life is actually much harder because everywhere you go, you're tempted by junk food. You know, you go to the airport, you're driving down the street and you see some billboard for some new burger or whatever, or some new ice cream flavor, or a new bag of chips that they're selling at the gas station or something. And you just instinctively reach for it. You get a craving for it because you haven't made the decision to be a model of health, of healthy eating in your own life. You see? And so you're wrestling with this, and then sometimes you're able to resist the junk food. Other times you pig out on it. You eat a little bit or you eat too much. Then you feel bad about it. Then you feel guilty. Then you gain some weight. You get on the scale. You look at your weight. Now you're not happy. Then you have to go on a sort of a diet. And so you're kind of yo-yoing back and forth. And once you lose the weight, then you feel like you can allow yourself a little bit of a cheat day here. And then you go and you pig out again. And the whole cycle begins all over again. And you're wasting so much mental energy on this that you really should be channeling towards your spirituality, your self-actualization work, towards your meditation practices, towards your explorations with psychedelics, towards your business, towards your family, towards your spouse, kids, and so forth. So indecision wastes a lot of energy. It's not efficient to be indecisive. What are the biggest causes of indecisiveness? First and foremost, it's a lack of clarity, a lack of self-knowing and self-understanding. You see, when you're born into this life, you don't know anything about yourself. It's very funny, very kind of paradoxical, because you are yourself, but you don't really know your own personality. I'm not even talking about that you don't know like your God self. Forget that. You don't even know your personality. You don't even know, like, it takes decades for you to discover your own personality. It takes decades for you to discover that you're an introvert or an extrovert or an ambivert, or that you're a thinker or you're a feeler, or that you're highly intuitive, or that you're very intelligent, or that you're very, gifted athletically, or that you have a certain strength or a certain talent with people. You're a great communicator, you're a good leader, or maybe you're a good lover, or maybe you excel at, working with technical data and numbers, whatever it is. It takes you a long time to discover that. It takes you a long time to discover what you want in your life and what you don't want in your life. Like, do you want to have a boss? Do you want to be your own boss? What do you want there? Do you want to be a highly social person or not? Are you the kind of person that's like a family person or not? Are you a very materialistic person or not? Does material stuff satisfy you or not? Are you a very intellectual person? Do you need a lot of like books and learning and information in your life to feel happy? Or are you more of an artistic person? Or are you more of a salesy, businessy type of person? It takes a long time to discover all this and figure this all out for yourself. Especially because a lot of times we're traumatized when we're young. And then so that trauma obscures, because the trauma requires us to then come up with coping and defense mechanisms, and then we confuse those coping and defense mechanisms for our own authentic personality, and then we can have these defense mechanisms and we can identify with them, and we can think that those are really who I am, but they're not. Those are just armoring that you've created to prevent yourself from being further hurt in your life, and to reduce your suffering and pain. But that's not the same thing as being, authentic and really understanding who you are underneath all that armor. For example, maybe you were bullied in school, and so now, because you were humiliated and bullied in school, you might think that you're not really a social person. But that's not really because you don't authentically enjoy being social. You actually do. It's just that you've been so bullied and you have wounds around that and trauma that until you heal all that and remove all that armor, then you're not going to be able to really connect with that authentic part of you that wants to socialize and connect with other people, right? And so now you're socially crippled, and you might even think that, oh, I'm a very shy, introverted, almost autistic-like person. But it's not that you're really autistic. It's actually that you're inexperienced because you got that early trauma and you're just socially inexperienced. And that's something that you can work out, but it might take you years to work through that trauma. So clarity is gained by really observing and studying yourself and understanding yourself at ever deeper levels. So that's the first cause of indecisiveness. The next huge cause of indecisiveness is fear. You fear making the wrong decision. The next big cause of indecisiveness is just being lazy and hoping and thinking that things will automatically work themselves out. It's sort of the passive approach rather than the proactive approach to life. Siding with passivity versus proactivity. This is almost always the wrong move. The next big cause of indecisiveness is a lack of responsibility. You're not actually taking responsibility for making important decisions in your life. You want somebody else to make it for you. The next big cause of indecisiveness is placing too much importance on the decision. It's ironic and paradoxical that a lot of these important and bold decisions, even though they are important and bold, and they will shape the whole trajectory of your life, if you placed too much emphasis on their importance, then actually that's going to make you indecisive because you're going to be like, oh my God, this decision is going to change my whole life. I have to get it perfect. And that perfectionism is actually going to get in the way of you making the decision. Again, this actually is very connected to fear because really in this instance, what you're doing is you're scared of making the wrong decision. So it's important in your own mind to reframe decision-making to take the fear out of it. And here's how you can do that. First, by realizing that most of your decisions can be remade. If you make the wrong decision, usually you have enough time in your life to go back and change it and redo it. And oftentimes, making the wrong decision actually gives you the information that you lacked and the clarity that you lacked. And it helps you to figure out your own deepest authentic desires and self. For example, when I got my first job as a game designer, at that point, I didn't know how deeply I needed to be my own boss. It wasn't until I had a boss for a year that I realized the problem that I have at my core with having a boss. It wasn't that, I didn't like having somebody tell me like what to do and being somebody's subordinate. That wasn't my problem. My problem was that I was deeply creatively, artistically ambitious, and I needed to get those ideas out, right? I had like a visionary core to me that needed to be expressed, and I was not able to express that when I had a boss, and my job was helping him to express his artistic core, right? That doesn't work for me. Somebody else can fill that role, but I can't fill that role. And I didn't know that. Nobody told me this when I was young. School didn't teach me this. My parents didn't teach me. I had to figure this out through trial and error. So I made a decision to get this job, but then I realized that was the wrong decision. The right decision for me was to start my own business. But I couldn't know that until I made this wrong decision. So don't be afraid of making wrong decisions and failing as a result, because actually failure is okay. I have an old episode that talks about how to reframe failure, how to really think deeply about failure. Go search for it. Very important one, actually. I should probably do a sort of a new updated version of it, because there's people really trap themselves with their fear of failure. And people really have a low tolerance for failure. And in this work, to succeed at life and to actualize your full potential, you're going to have to fail so much. You're not going to get through this without massive failure. In fact, you have to embrace failure and look forward to failure and actually find ways of failing faster. Get the failure out of the way. And one of the ways you do that is you make decisions, clear decisions. rather than stalling because you're afraid to fail. Another way to reframe fear of failure is to remember that most of your decisions are not going to kill you, which means that you're going to be able to get a second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance. And this is realistically how you're going to solve most of your problems in life. You're not going to solve them by making the one perfect decision right off the bat and then succeeding. It's going to be like, you're going to make the wrong decision. You're going to fail 5, 10 times. And then just because of your persistence and your sheer doggedness and your commitment to your life purpose and self-actualization, if you're persistent enough, eventually, like on the 11th attempt, you'll succeed. And it's not by accident you're going to succeed. You're going to succeed because of those first 10 failures, because each of those 10 failures are going to teach you important lessons that you're going to use to fine-tune and to calibrate your approach until finally you get it right and you learn on the 11th time and then you succeed. And so really, you should look at the entire process as a process of success. It's not that the success comes on the 11th time. It's that those first 10, that was your success happening. It's just that success has a long wind-up period. Another way to reframe fear of failure is remember that making choices, even the wrong choices, will expose you to massive experience. And this is really good. This is what you're going to use to then learn and grow yourself. So just because you made a bad decision doesn't mean that it wasn't good for you. See my episode called Expose Yourself to Massive Experience. So the general rule is this: if you have a decision to make and you're deciding between sort of the status quo, your current default trajectory, which is not going to expose you to any really new, massive, interesting experience that's going to grow you significantly, versus a decision that is going to thrust you into a new situation and really going to challenge you, choose the one that's going to challenge you. This is almost always the best choice. Even if it ends up being not your ultimate destination, it's still going to grow you and challenge you. Whereas if you just stay in your comfort zone, what's going to come of that? You're going to stagnate. That's what's going to happen. So I would say, all else being equal, always err on the side of action, proactivity, and massive new experience. Like, let's say you can stay at your current job that you've been working for the last 10 years and just keep doing the same old thing over and over again. Or you could take a risk and maybe some new job was offered in some new country that you've never been to before. This would require you to relocate, to take the risk of living in a different country. Maybe you won't like it. Maybe that job doesn't even pay as much money. Maybe you're not going to like that new job, whatever. But even if all that is true, even if it's the worst case scenario that you don't like the country, you don't like the job and so forth, just the fact that you go through the process of moving there and going through maybe a year of working there before you decide to quit, that massive life experience you gain is going to be so much more valuable than just doing the same old thing you've been doing for the last 10 years. Also, in most cases, when you have a decision and you're not sure between which two to choose because it's so close, like, should I become a filmmaker or a musician? I don't know. I like both. You can kind of get stuck in that because you make it, in your mind, you make it seem like you can only choose one. But realistically, what you can do in most times is you can do one for a couple of years, and then if it doesn't work out, you can switch and do that the other option that you didn't choose. You can then explore that option. So most of the time, you can explore both sides of the fork. That's what I'm calling the fork. You can take the fork. You can take both sides of the fork. Now, what that's going to require working twice as hard. See? Because the fear you have is like, well, what if I work on being a musician for 2 years, and then I realize that all that time and energy and effort was wasted because I don't really want to be a musician, doesn't align with me, and then I have to go to become a filmmaker, I have to start from scratch. That's going to require another 2 years. I'm going to lose 2 years. Not really, though. Because even that experience you gained with the music, those 2 years of music and working on that, you're going to be able to translate a lot of that over. A lot of it's going to be applicable even to your filmmaking. And you're going to learn a lot about yourself in the process of making that music. And you're going to develop some core skills, like you're going to develop discipline, work ethic, a good morning routine, waking up on time, this kinds of stuff. You're going to learn, you can learn those making music, and then you can switch to filmmaking, and those will still apply within filmmaking, you see. So don't fret too much about making close decisions. You can often do both, just not at the same time, right? Don't do both at the same time. Don't try to become a musician and a filmmaker at once. What you should do ideally is say, okay, let's say I'm 90% passionate about being a musician, and I'm 85% passionate about being a filmmaker. Therefore, I'm going to go with musician. I'm going to do that for a few years, see how that works out. If it's not working out, then I'm going to go transition back into filmmaker, let's say, and then I'm going to do that. And then if that doesn't work out, then I'm going to find some third thing. This means you're going to work a lot harder than most people, but this will actually be good for you because you're also going to grow from that work. Don't be afraid of hard work. Don't be afraid of working more than everybody else is working around you. It's going to pay off for you eventually. Now you might say, but Leo, what if I make a disastrous decision? Shouldn't I be worried about that? That's possible, of course. There's no guarantees that you won't make a disastrous decision. However, consider the following. What if your fear of making disastrous decisions actually leads you into the disaster of not making any decisions at all, stalling out the clock in your life, and then just ending up with mediocrity? Why aren't you more afraid of that possibility? Because that is the most likely possibility. The most likely possibility is not that you're going to make a disastrous decision, is that you're going to make no decision at all, and that will be the disaster of your life. Now you might say, well, Leo, that's not going to be a disaster. That's just going to be kind of a comfortable, cushy, normal life. Don't be so sure about that. Because you see, when you get stuck in a rut of a comfortable, cushy kind of life, it's okay for the first 5-10 years. But then after 10 years, you go so sick of it. You start getting depressed. You stop going to work on time. Then you lose your job. You start backsliding. You start drinking. You start doing drugs. You start hanging around with the wrong people. You get depressed. You go on medication to treat your depression. Then you're addicted to that medication. Then you become suicidal. And you lose all your passion for life. You slowly slide down this slope of mediocrity. This happens with a lot of people. This is very common. So this is something you should be genuinely concerned about. Don't be paranoid about it. But it should be always in the back of your mind that if you're not going to be decisive, then this is likely what's going to happen. You're going to slide downward in your life into mediocrity. And especially you should be worried about this if you're listening to my content, right? Because you're going to see me growing over the years. You're going to see me growing massively and talking about these cool things that I'm discovering and sharing these new insights and spirituality and all this and the business stuff that I do, the creative stuff that I do. You're going to see me growing massively, but then you're not going to be doing it. And if you're not doing it along with me, then that's just going to make you feel even worse. Because you know your full potential. If you're sticking with me, I'm going to be highlighting to you the highest potential that you got as a living being. But if you're not taking action towards that, you're not living in a principled, integrous manner, you're just, going with the default trajectory with all your friends and family. Listening to me is going to make you depressed. It's going to make you hate your life. It's going to make you hate God because you're going to wonder, like, Leo, why isn't God giving me all these gifts that you keep promising? Well, because you are God. And if you're God, then For God to give you the gifts that God can give you, you have to give them to yourself. You have to create them. You get that? God has no hands other than your own. Your hands are God's hands. Your mind is God's mind. Your goals are God's goals. Your decisions are God's decisions. If you decide to sit at home for 10 years, living off of, government subsidies or your parents' money, living in their basement, playing video games, and eating junk food, that's you as God deciding that that's the kind of life you want. The problem is that you're making that decision unconsciously, because nobody would consciously choose such a thing. That's a decision made by default. That's what you get when you don't make a decision. That's what you get when you're indecisive. So finally, let's get to the core of this topic, which is how to be decisive. Number one, be willing to make mistakes. Don't be afraid of making bad and wrong decisions. Number two, train yourself on minor, mundane decisions. Before you go making bold decisions in your life, because those are challenging to make, first, you can train yourself every day on little things throughout the day. For example, when you go to the restaurant with your friends and they are ordering something off the menu, how long does it take you to decide what you want to order? Are you sitting there hemming and hawing and mumbling about, oh, well, I don't know, should I get the chicken? Should I get the fish? Should I get the steak? What should I get? I don't know. No. Train yourself from now on to make those little decisions quickly, decisively. This is probably the best method I know for how to train yourself to be decisive. Like practically, how do you do it? Start with little decisions and force yourself to make them rapidly. The stakes there are not very big. That's what's nice with the little decisions. You don't have to, if you choose the wrong meal at the restaurant, it's not a big deal. Force yourself to choose it quickly. And then figure out, what does it take for you to choose the right meals? You can actually dissect that. You can kind of see what are your culinary values and what meals honor those values. And then you can make good decisions based on that by knowing what you like, what you don't like. Other little decisions, even like, for example, when you're driving somewhere, let's say you got to drive to your dentist's office tomorrow, right? For an appointment. Now, you could take one road or another road to get to the dentist. Let's say both roads are about equally long. They take about the same time. Sometimes one takes a little bit longer. It has some construction on it. Sometimes a road takes a little bit longer because it has more traffic on it, depending on the time of the day, right? And you're in your car and you're about to drive to the dentist's office and you don't know which road to take. You don't know. And you might sit there in your mind for a few minutes and just kind of like stuck, paralyzed. Well, now you've set the intention that you want to become a decisive person in your life, so make that decision quickly. Even if it's going to be the wrong decision, make it quickly. And train yourself to keep doing that. And when you do that, experience the kind of joy and relief that comes with being decisive versus the pain and suffering that comes with being indecisive about such things. Oftentimes, you should also notice that you're being indecisive about trivial things that don't even matter. Like in this case, the difference between taking road A versus road B might be 2 minutes. You might spend 10 minutes in your own mind wrestling with which road to take without realizing that actually it doesn't matter which road you take. It really doesn't matter. Take the more scenic route. Take the route that takes 2 minutes longer and listen to some music and enjoy your day, right? Rather than being stuck in your head, beating yourself up about taking the wrong road. Be very mindful of that. A lot of times you're forced with a decision which is actually very trivial. It seems significant, but it isn't. Therefore, don't waste your mental energy on it. Just choose and go with the thing. Get on with your life. The third step for how to be decisive is deliberate about important decisions, but once you've made your decision, stick to it. train the habit of sticking with it rather than the habit of backtracking. So one of the worst things you can do is make a decision, then the next day change your mind, then the next day change your mind back again, and do this over and over again. It's like, let's say you've decided to break up with your girlfriend because you think she's not right for you. So you break up with her. And then the next day you're like, but I really like her. Maybe she is right for me. And then you go back. And then you say, no, actually, I was right the first time. And then you go back again. Like this sort of back and forth, this crap, it wastes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and it creates a lot of suffering for you and for others in your life. So train yourself not to do that. It's sort of a decision you make. You make a decision that you're not going to be backtracking on your decisions, and then you stick with it. And you incur the cost. That means if you make the wrong decision, you stick with it. You don't backtrack. And you feel the cost of the wrong decision. Because actually you recognize that training this habit of backtracking all the time, this is actually sort of an even worse meta decision that you're making. And you don't want to do that. The fourth point about being decisive is get really clear about your values, your vision, your life purpose, and keep working on that and clarifying it. You don't just do that once in your life, then you're done. You keep clarifying and massaging your values and really poking and prodding at them over your lifetime until they get clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer. And then when you're rock solid on that, it becomes very, very easy to make decisions. It becomes easy to decide what kind of people you should have in your life or which kind you shouldn't. It becomes easy to decide, where to go Friday night. It becomes easy to decide what kind of food you should or shouldn't eat, and what kind of business proposals you should entertain and which kind you can't. If somebody sends you an email promising you to make a bunch of money through some get-rich-quick scheme by collaborating with them, you can quickly say, no, that's against my values. I don't even need to think about it. It's just contrary to my values, and therefore, no. It's an easy no. When you're not clear about your own values, you become very easily manipulatable, very easily influenced. Other people will become your puppet masters. The next point closely related to this is leverage your top values that you found using the life purpose course process that I helped you to go through. Use your top 10 values to help you make your decisions. So literally into every important decision, you go in there and you ask yourself, okay, my top 10 values, where does this decision, which of these top 10 values does this decision honor? And which of them does it dishonor? And if it dishonors more of them than it honors, then that's a bad decision. Easy. And if it honors like your top 3 values, that's an easy yes decision. Because you can't really get better than that. If some decision is honoring your top 3 values, what more could you want? The next point is take responsibility for being a decision maker. Think of yourself as a decision maker. And stop trying to outsource decisions to other people. Don't ask others to decide for you. A lot of times people will send me a message hoping that I can decide something for them. Like, Leo, should I break up with her or shouldn't I? Leo, should I do this thing or should I do that thing? Leo, should I take psychedelics or should I wait a few years? Leo, should I pursue this life purpose or that life purpose? Should I pursue this passion or that passion first? Should I start my business now or should I finish my education first? Should I go pursue awakening today or should I wait to get my finances in order? Don't ask me these questions. Assume responsibility for making these decisions. Remember, you're the CEO of your life, not me. The next point is don't stall or procrastinate decisions. Train yourself to make decisions as they arise. The next point is observe the consequences and suffering that comes from backtracking and stalling on important decisions. Observe the inner turmoil it creates. Observe how it drains your mind, how it causes you to overthink, overworry, and fear. Like, what's nice about training yourself to become decisive is that it also gives you sort of a cool and calm and groundedness amidst chaos. That's an attractive quality. It gives you confidence. That doesn't mean that you're always going to be making the right decision. It means that even if you're making the wrong decision, you're still going to do it in a cool, collected way. And you're not going to be lured in by backtracking, and you're not going to be procrastinating. You're not going to be afraid of these decisions. You're going to confront these decisions head on with responsibility. And it's going to be relatively easy for you to do so because you're very clear about your values, unlike most people. So I'm not just telling you that you're going to be making decisions kind of like randomly, really quickly, based on nothing, just in order to kind of like project an air of confidence and decisiveness. This is kind of like a fake way of going about it. I'm not telling you to become like that. Fundamentally, you're going to be grounded in your values. You're going to know your values so well that you will be able to make really high quality decisions very quickly in most situations, and they're going to be very accurate. But it's going to take you time to train yourself to get to that point, right? You're not going to start there. This is an aspect of your character that you're developing, is decisiveness. It might take you 5 or 10 years of incremental work to get to that level of like really solid, precision level decisiveness, very authentic, decisive, confident sort of manner. It's going to maybe take you 5-10 years to develop that. You're going to start today, and you're going to start with these little decisions and then make your way up to bigger ones. That's something you're going to develop. And then kind of like envision to yourself how awesome it's going to feel once you reach that level. The next point is observe the consequences of not being clear using introspection. That method that I have a video on called Developing Introspection. I also have a couple of other videos, one called Learning Equals Observation and another one called Learning Equals Behavior Change. So those come into play here. You're going to learn how to be decisive by observing the consequences of your indecisiveness and lack of clarity. Get that? You're also going to learn in this case how to be decisive by changing your behavior. Through the observation, then you're going to ask yourself, how do I got to change my behavior to become a more decisive person? That's the key question. How do I have to change my behavior to become a more decisive person? Look, ultimately becoming more decisive is, it's not rocket science. It's pretty simple. You become decisive by making lots of decisions and kind of pushing yourself to make them quicker and to observe the consequences of making them, to observe the ways in which you procrastinate and resist making these decisions, and to observe and to kind of line up, force your decisions to line up better with your top values, which you're clarifying all the time. So by doing this combination of things, this is how you become decisive. And this is something you practice over you don't need to practice it every day because some days you won't have any important decisions to make, but like you'll be practicing it on a weekly basis over the next, 5 to 10 years. And then if you keep doing that, eventually you'll become a much more decisive person. And then you'll become a lot more confident, and people will look up to you and will respect you a lot more when you develop this capacity. It's very similar to developing the capacity of a sense of humor. I have an episode called How to Be Funny, where I give you a step-by-step process for how to develop a sense of humor. You could actually do that. You're not just born with a good or bad sense of humor. You have to develop it. And there's a method you can go through to actually train yourself to develop a much higher sense of humor. I outline that in that episode. Well, you can go through a similar method to train yourself to become decisive. The more decisions you make, the more consciously you make them, the better you're going to get at it. Also, what will help you in this process is to put yourself into positions where you have to make lots of important decisions. The most obvious place where this can happen is at a leadership role at your job. Push yourself into leadership roles, management roles, and so forth. These roles come with more responsibility and more decisions. A lot of times people don't take these management jobs because actually they're not good at making decisions. Making decisions is stressful. And so people just, stay in the lower positions. Then they earn less money. They also grow less. It's not easy to be a good manager. Also, train yourself to make decisions before problems arise. You want to be preemptive with your decision making. So, a classic example of this is always use condoms. Decide to always use condoms. That's a really good decision to make, because it's too late. Once you have a pregnancy scare, it's too late. Or, for example, quitting the wrong career. If you're in the wrong career and you sense it, quit as soon as possible. Don't stall on it, because that problem is going to get worse and worse and worse over time. Preempt the really worst case of this situation by quitting within the next 6 months. Because if you stay there for 5, 10 years, that's when it's going to get really bad. You got to foresee that. For example, if you're involved in a criminal lifestyle, maybe your family is involved in some criminal activity, you got to see that this is not going to lead anywhere good. And you got to make a decision to exit this lifestyle, distance yourself from these kinds of people, this family, these kinds of friends that you have. Or if you're involved in it yourself, you need to plan an exit strategy, because there's serious problems are going to arise if you keep doing this. So far, you've been lucky. Maybe you haven't gotten caught yet, but eventually you'll get caught and it'll be disastrous. So make a decision preemptively to get out. Here's another distinction you should make, is between shallow decisions versus deep decisions. A deep decision is one in which you've deeply contemplated and understood why you should or shouldn't do a thing, why a thing is right or wrong for you. Right? So a shallow decision might be like you're walking down the street and you see a food stall with some junk food there, like they're selling greasy pizza. And you feel a craving for that pizza, but you say, you know what? No, I'm going to go eat something healthier, further down the street. There's a healthier type of food. I'm going to get that instead. But that's just like a little one-off, like shallow decision you just made. It's not very deep. By a deep decision, I mean like you sit down and you really contemplate, like, okay, let me think about all the stuff that I'm putting into my body on a daily basis, all the food that I'm putting into my body. What is this going to have? What impact is this going to have, like, on my life? What are the most important things in my life? Let's say for me, the most important things are my creative work, my business, my life purpose. Let's say maybe time with my children if I have them, right? Maybe these are my top 4 priorities. And then I have to connect and say, like, well, how does eating this junk food all the time, how does that connect with serving my top values? And then you realize, wait a minute, it's contradicting those values, right? Because if I'm eating junk food, I'm not going to have as much time to spend with my kids because I'm not going to be feeling so good. I'm not going to have enough energy. Maybe I'll die younger. There's that. I'm not going to be as creative and artistic because also my brain's not going to be functioning as well, and so forth. And so forth. It contradicts your top values. And so when you sit down and deeply contemplate this, then you can ask yourself, well, what if I make a decision to not eat junk food ever again? Not because just like I don't want to be fat or something, or because I don't want to have a stomach ache one day. Not because of that, but because I want to honor my top 4 values, let's say, and this is conflicting with that, and it's undermining my top 4 values. Therefore, I'm going to decide for the rest of my life never to touch pizza ever again. That would be a deep decision. That's what I mean by a deep decision, where you really think through, like, what the full consequences are long-term and towards your ultimate overarching life purpose and vision for your life and your top values and who you want to be as a character in life. And then based on that, you say no to a thing, or you say yes to some other thing that is aligned with that. For example, make a deep decision not to drink alcohol. That would be different than a shallow decision. A shallow decision is like, you know what? I had a hangover last night, so tonight I'm not going to drink. because I don't want another hangover. That's a shallow decision. That's like a one-off kind of thing, because a few weeks will pass and then you'll go drinking again because you didn't really think through what drinking does to you. A deep decision about drinking is when you think about all the impact that this drinking has on your liver, on your health, on how you feel about yourself, on how you're able to communicate with others, the kind of problems that arise when you drink too much, the amount of money that you spend over your lifetime on drinking, and the effect it has on your brain, and the bad example it sets for your children and your friends, and maybe the kind of danger it gets you into when you're driving drunk occasionally from the bar back home because you don't have a ride, right? But you're incurring some risk there. And then you think about all the hangovers you're going to have in your whole life, and you think about all the vomiting you're going to do, and you're going to think about all the extra calories it's going to add, all that alcohol, and how fat it's going to make you, and how it's going to conflict with your deepest values, and how it's going to conflict with spirituality and meditation. You're going to skip days of meditation because you're going to be too hungover from drinking to meditate, right? So like when you connect all of that, then you can make a deep decision not to drink ever again. Likewise, you can make a deep decision not to cheat in relationships. A shallow decision not to cheat would be just like, oh, I find her really hot, but I would feel guilty if I cheated, so I don't cheat this one time. It's like, yeah, but that's just like this one time. The next time, maybe I will cheat if I find someone hotter, right? It's not a deep decision. A deep decision would be like, do I want to be the kind of person that cheats? Because cheating involves lying. Do I want to be a liar? What would it mean if I said yes to lying? How is lying going to impact my top values and what kind of example I set, and also my ability to have a family, to have children, to maintain a deep, intimate relationship with a spouse, all this sort of stuff? Is that going to be possible if I'm the kind of person that's going to be tempted to lie and then to cheat? Right? You think through all that and then you say, oh, okay, then it's easy now to say no to cheating. How about a deep decision not to exploit your customers? Or a deep decision to set boundaries in relationships? A deep decision never to allow yourself to have your values violated, your deepest values violated in a relationship. A deep decision not to chase get-rich-quick schemes if you're involved in business. Okay, so now you understand shallow versus deep decisions. Here's some things I want you to contemplate. Write down some of these questions. These are going to be very good homework assignments for you. So first of all, contemplate, do you want to be a decisive person, or do you want to be an indecisive person? Actually think about that. Think about the pros and cons. Also, think about what it's going to take, the work it's going to take to become a decisive person, because it's going to take work. You have to retrain yourself. Do you want to do that work? Is it a worthwhile investment for you? Contemplate that, and then make a deep decision if you want to be a decisive person. As you're thinking about that, contemplate what indecisiveness will cost you over your whole lifetime. You need to drill into your mind that indecision is much worse than making the wrong decision. It's also much worse. It's going to cost you much more in the long term than it will to just train yourself and discipline yourself to become a decisive person. The work you do to become decisive, in the end, is going to be less than all the misery and bullshit that you put up with by being indecisive for the rest of your life. Think through all that. Don't just listen to me mindlessly. Think through it. Your mind has to gain traction with these ideas. You have to think them through almost like logical proofs or mathematical theorems. You have to think through them and understand why the math turns out to work the way it works. Also contemplate this. Why have you been indecisive in your life? If you think of yourself as an indecisive person, and indecisiveness has been a problem your whole life, ask yourself why. Also, think about what have been the costs. The trick with this is that you probably don't even realize the full cost of your indecisiveness. There have been many bold, big, important decisions in your life that you've stalled on or ignored making that would have massively improved your life, and you don't even know what those are. because you've just been stalling and being indecisive for so long. You don't even know how amazing your life could have been if you've been making better decisions and being more decisive. So you have to like go back and think about like, where could my life be if I was really bold and decisive? You need some vision here. Also contemplate this. What are some really good decisions that I could make for my life? And also the opposite, what are some really bad decisions that I could make in my life? And then contemplate, what decisions have I been stalling on? Then I want you to contemplate, how can I make better decisions? And I want you to contemplate, what makes a decision good? Actually do this as your homework assignment. This will gain you valuable insight beyond just the theory that I give you here. It's going to be more powerful than hearing it from me. Making great decisions also ties in with intuition and wisdom. I have 2 episodes about that. I have one episode called How to Harness Your Intuition. Go look at that. I have another episode called What is Wisdom? Go look at that. Developing your intuition, your creativity, your wisdom, and exposing yourself to massive experience will make you a really good decision maker. These skills and capacities will all synergize together. And in the future, I'll have an episode about how to be very creative. I'm very passionate about studying how to become creative and what creativity is. It's a tricky topic, but also a very important one. So look, intuition, creativity, wisdom, and massive experience. All these 3 things or 4 things will synergize together. In addition to your intention and your decision to become decisive in your life. So in conclusion, decide to push yourself rather than waiting for life to push you. Your most powerful decisions will actually be so strong, they won't even feel or seem like decisions at all. At least that's how it should be. There are things in your life I want you to notice that you have decided that are so non-negotiable for you that they don't even feel like decisions. For example, like for me, that would be living a life with passion and purpose and not wasting my life. To me, that's absolutely non-negotiable. I can't live life without that. It's so non-negotiable that it's even wrong to call that a decision. Because when you say it's a decision, it's as though like there was an alternative option, and there never was. For me, it was obvious since I was like 7 years old that that's what I want from life. And it's this kind of decision that is the most powerful decision. The kind that leaves no alternative. Another one for you is rejecting the easy life. Rejecting the path of least resistance. Never doing a thing just because it's the easiest of all the alternatives. That was also a decision I made early on in my life that was really not a decision. But it's shaped the whole trajectory of my life. That's non-negotiable for me. It's invalid in my own worldview to do something just because it's easy. You have to do the thing that's right, not the thing that's easy. Another one for me was the pursuit of philosophy, truth, and profound understanding. To me, this is non-negotiable. There is no life for me without this. It's this or death. That's how I frame it in my own mind. So in that sense, it's not even a decision. It's so aligned with my top values that I couldn't imagine living life without this. I don't even understand how people can live life without this. It doesn't compute in my worldview. But you see, there's a lot of power behind that. When you take something so seriously, there's so much power behind that. It grounds you so deeply. It tells you the direction. It's sort of like the absolute compass of your life. These examples I'm giving you right now, these are sort of like the ultimate compass that runs my life. I have other values besides this that are a little bit more negotiable, but these are just absolutely non-negotiable. And then the last example is awakening. So when I heard that such a thing exists as awakening, before I even had one, when I first heard about it, like 10 years ago or so, for me, in my mind, it was absolutely clear that I needed to have it. I needed to experience it. I didn't even know what it was. I just know I needed it. And there's no alternative. There was no option. It was like, well, should I pursue awakening, or maybe I should go chase girls or earn more money? It's like, I don't know. Like, maybe I'm mostly leaning towards awakening, but part of me is like wanting to chase. It's like, no, like awakening. It's like non-negotiable, right? There's no alternative to that. That's what you need if you really want to wake up. It's that level of commitment and clarity that you need. So I suggest you contemplate your deepest values very deeply, find the ones that are non-negotiable for you, and stop compromising on those. Make some permanent decisions about honoring those top values of yours. And if you're still confused about what I'm talking about here with top values and you're wondering how to find yours, that's what my life purpose course is for. It's over 20 hours of exclusive content that is not featured on the main channel that shows you how to find your top values and how to align your life with that. So go check that out if you haven't. All right, that's it. I'm done here. Check out my website, check out my blog, check out my Patreon page, check out the forum, check out my book reviews list, check out the life purpose course, check out all this stuff. I have more stuff coming in the future. I'm working on some new courses coming in the future. So stick around for all that. And lastly, I want to tell you this. Look, if you found my work, if you found this channel, these videos, you've been very lucky, extremely lucky. You stumbled upon this channel by fluke luck. You are like you won the lottery. 1 in 100,000 people will stumble upon these videos by fluke luck. Everybody who stumbles upon my content does so through fluke luck, because I don't go out there advertising or anything like that. If you found my content on YouTube or iTunes or whatever, it's through fluke luck. Understand this. You were very lucky, but that's not enough. You were lucky to find the content. Now you got to work the content. You found a gold mine of life-transforming information. These ideas, concepts, perspectives will transform your whole life if you apply them properly and you really work them. But it's very easy for you to squander your good fortune here. It's not enough for you to be lucky in this work. You were lucky to stumble upon the possibility of this work. Now you got to actually listen to all of it, contemplate it, do the homework assignments, journal about it, think deeply about it, start applying it in your life, and you got to be consistent with it on a weekly basis for years and decades. Without that, you're not going to get the results. So the biggest honor you can pay to my work is by doing it. I'm receiving more and more comments from people on the forum, on YouTube, on Instagram, on, through email and so forth. I'm receiving more and more comments from people telling me that this work, they've been following it for like 5 years, 8 years, 3 years, whatever. And they tell me that it's transformed their life. So I'd like you to think about that possibility, to take that possibility seriously and to become one of those people. Because the majority of people who watch my content, they're not going to be those people. I would like to say that everybody experiences that, but they don't, because it takes a lot of work. And it's only going to transform your life to the degree to which you take it seriously. More than just a passing hobby of listening to this kind of material while you're cooking, dinner or doing your laundry. It has to be something deeper than that. It's for those people that I do this work. For the people who are going to take it seriously, those few who are going to take it seriously, I'd like you to make a decision now. Perhaps one of the biggest decisions you'll make in your life, whether you want to be one of those people. That decision is up to you. The results are up to you.